which is why it makes sense for the blacks or the Negroes in America to have came over here and was speaking Hebrew. You know what I mean? So a lot of people like to think that when we was calling white people massa, that we was speaking broken Hebrew for master, and we wasn't. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's Hebraic. That means oppressor. You know what I mean? Like, we was out here really speaking and knowing who we were until they whipped it out of us, i.e. that series Roots. Of course, they tried to make it seem like we were Africans calling ourselves African names, but we wasn't. We wasn't speaking no African tongues. We were over here. When we came over here, and I'll show you also that the slave inventory, because of course we all know that the transatlantic slave trade actually did happen, and they have records of the cargo that came over here by age, by race, by height, by sex, and what their skills were, and what year they came over here, and what ships they came over here on. And that's another thing that people's stupidity allows people to think that there were no ships that came over here when there were. And just because you can't find them today doesn't mean that the records don't show the different ships that our ancestors came over here on. And what you'll find is that when we came over here, we had names that were rooted in Hebrew. We didn't have African names like Antetokounmpo and Matumbo and, all of them Adebayos. We didn't have that. You know what I'm saying? Olajawans and all that. We didn't have that. We had Hebraic names like Benayah, Alayah. All of those names had Yah in the name. So why is it that the African people that you think are African got names that have the word Yah in it? And everybody knows that the Israelites do that. And you can look that up in the Bible as you read all of these different names of the books of the Bible. When you see Isaiah, if you were to read that in ancient Hebrew, it would have the word Yah in it. If you look at Elijah, Jah, or whatever, that would, in the ancient Hebrew, would have the name Yah in it. Jeremiah would have the name Yah in it. So many different names. And that's the Israelite culture and the tongue that we were speaking, because we had all of that stuff on the west coast of Africa. See, what white people want you to think is that you were the Aborigines here in America, when that's not true. But the Aborigines here in America were of black people. They were Negroes, but just different types of Negroes. And once you start dissecting, the accepted history, then you'll find out that they classified us all as Negro. You can go back to Acts chapter 13:1. We were all called Negroes. So what's the difference between a Mexican being called a Negro, a Native Indian being called a Negro, Seminole Indian being called a Negro, the Argentinian people were called Negroes, the people from Peru was called Negroes. How about the Caribbean islands? They were all called Negroes, but they weren't called anything else. And on the west coast of Africa, the tribes of Benjamin and the tribes of Judah and some of the half tribes of Levi were also called Negroes. We were all called Negroes, and that's the classification you want to look for